Hey, this video is in response to Archie Luxuries. Is Omega a true luxury watch? Um, uh, I didn't like what he had to say, and at first I thought he was actually some authority on watches, and now I think he doesn't really know much at all. In any event, he made a lot of false statements, and I just wanted to comment them and correct them. About 57 seconds in, he said Omega is not Rolex. I would agree with that. Omega is Omega, Rolex is Rolex. I don't think Omega is trying to be Rolex. And I'll point out first and foremost that this is actually my watch, because it's not an image that I stole off of the internet. I find it kind of interesting that there still aren't any videos he has where they're actually videos. So in any event, I think Omega is just trying to put out the best watch they can. They're not trying to be Rolex. There's a lot of reasons why I bought my Omega. At the time, everyone I knew was buying Rolexes, and they were buying Rolexes because that was the trendy, popular watch to buy, and not because they knew about them per se. What I like about my Omega in particular, and this one's an older version, I've beat the hell out of it, treated badly, it's been on every business trip, and I've remodeled 3 houses with it and poured concrete with it, and it's hung in there and it's done its job and it's done great. But it's a great quality watch, and I think it had a lot of inherent benefits over the Rolex. It was different, and that's why I bought it, between those two reasons. But not that I'm going to go diving ever, but it does have a helium escape valve. I thought that was nice that they did that, and I like the look of the crown. I also thought the band was considerably more substantial than the Rolex. I thought the Rolex band was, well, cheaper. I like the fact that there's 2 deployment pins there to push together to easily open the band, versus Rolex's deal where you have to wedge your fingernail under the clasp. And don't get me wrong, I actually like the Rolex too. I'm not trying to suggest one watch is bad. They're all great Swiss watches. I don't understand why Archie doesn't understand that yet. I also like the fact that there's a lot more width to this comparison to the Rolex. So anyway, this has been a great watch, and I also believe when they came out with the Planet Ocean, if there was any doubt about the quality of the watch comparison to the Rolex Submariner, I thought the Planet Ocean upped the ante, so to speak. And I also felt that, it was a little bit, they had a standard size, they had an oversize, it had a big power reserve between windings. It was just a great watch all the way around. And I think it's interesting that later, at that point, Rolex then came out with their own oversized watch, such as the Deep Sea. So not sure if Rolex felt as though they had to catch up with Omega, but nonetheless they came out with a similar oversized watch shortly after. So but they're both good brands, and it's not about ragging on one over the other. But in any event, Archie has said that the Omega is too far mass marketed. I'm not exactly sure what he means by that. Omega and Rolex both advertise. I don't know that they over advertise. They advertise as much as they need to. I would say a mass marketed watch would be a Timex. So, anyway, or maybe even an Invicta, but I don't know that it's too mass marketed. But he also took exception with the fact that there are too many generic movements at about 1 minute 58 seconds. In particular, he took umbrage to the fact that they use the ETA ETA movement, as it's commonly nicknamed. Um, I would not consider the ETA movement a generic movement. I think, as a guy that obviously doesn't know much about watches, he probably is not familiar with the history of ETA, but they aren't a generic movement. I would say they are the gold standard of automatic movements. And ETA started back in 1856, but they actually they can trace their roots further back to 1793. In comparison, Rolex started in 1905. So to suggest it's a generic movement, I'd make the argument that they've been obviously making them, hundreds of years, and it's been a wonderful movement so far. I'd also point out that anyone that claims, well, not anyone, but most anyone that claims they make their own proprietary in-house movement, if you're a semi-watch nerd like me, the more you dig deeper into it, a lot of times you'll find out that they'll claim it's their proprietary movement, but the more you get into it, they basically taken an ETA movement and somewhat redesigned it and then called it their own. So it still has ETA DNA in it, even if it's their own movement. He's also mentioned that Omega sells at chains, stores, and shopping malls. I'm not sure how they handle things in Australia. In America, you can buy both Rolex and Omega at upscale jewelry stores and shopping malls here. It's not a matter of only being able to get one over the other. So I'd also point out that he's a Philly Pat fan, and they also have used ETA movements, which were Lamania. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but those are sister movements to the ETA. So to take a shot at Omega for their ETA movement use, really he needs to take a shot at his own Philly Pat movement use. I'd also point out that he totally did not even mention the fact that Rolex has a secondary line, Tudor, which used nothing but ETA movements. You could get a Tudor Submariner and various other models. And again, if he doesn't like the ETA movement, well, Rolex's own Tudor used the movement. So that's kind of interesting. And Tudor obviously was marketed primarily in foreign markets and Asia and what have you. So Tudor also used a lot of layered stainless steel straps instead of solid links. They were, coiled and coiled construction and layered versus solid stainless steel, which again, that's probably relative to the time. Everyone was probably doing it back then, so not taking a shot at him per se. He was also very critical of the fact at 6 minutes and 49 seconds about the relationship with James Bond, calling it a pay-per-play relationship. I think this is where things get probably the most retarded. I don't really care that Omega has a relationship with James Bond. I don't care either way. I could care less. I find it interesting that he was so hypercritical of that, but at the same time, again, this is where his history is a bit skewed, and he makes the statement that he would not buy an Omega because of the relationship with James Bond. He thinks that's kind of cheesy or something to that degree. I would like to point out to Archie that the James Bond franchise actually started with Rolex, not Omega, to the degree that Dr. No came out in 1962, and he was wearing a Rolex in Dr. No, and he was wearing a Rolex up to and through the 1989 release of License to Kill. So that's a 27-year relationship that Rolex had with James Bond. In comparison, Omega's had a 17-year relationship with James Bond. So there's considerably more Rolex James Bond heritage than there is Omega. So it's just kind of asinine to suggest that. In the event, I think they're both good watches, and next time he does a film, he should actually do, or next time he does a video, Archie should do a little bit more homework. He also made mention of the fact that there were some ugly styles that came out during the 70s. I'd also like to point out to him that if you look around the 70s, everything was ugly. Anybody was, any manufacturer was making what was, considered trendy and cool at the time. And I would also point out that his Patek, they had some ugly styles during the 70s as well. I went back and checked that too. But again, that was indicative of the era, and that was also during a time when there was a lot of competition from Japan with their watches, and it was a hard time for the Swiss watchmakers, so he did whatever he can to survive. In any event, I think a Rolex is a good quality watch. I think my Omega is a great quality watch. I have other Swiss watches. Just like to say that he's wrong. Thanks.